Hi everyone, this is Lara Hammock from the Marble Jar channel, and in today's video I will give you my summary and takeaways from the book called Exaholics, Breaking Your Addiction to an Ex-Love by Lisa Marie Bobby. So I am now a mental health therapist in residence, and I have been reading as many books as I can on every condition, every human issue, every disorder, so that I can be as helpful as possible to my clients. And I figured if I'm going to read all these books, I should share my summaries with you. So here goes. So the book I read most recently is about Love Addicts, which the author, Lisa Marie Bobby, calls Exaholics. The reason this book appeals to me is that after hearing account after account of the loss and the grief and the anxiety that people go through after breakups, it started to occur to me that love was pretty similar to an addiction and that breakups felt a lot like withdrawal. This book is by no means the only one to make this claim. There are lots, but it did happen to be the one that my library had available, and it may be the most recent since it was published in 2019. Okay, so before I get into the contents of the book, if you are going through a rough breakup, I would highly recommend reading or listening to this book just as an act of self-care. The author is sympathetic and nurturing and understanding, and the whole thing will make you feel less crazy and less alone with your enormous feelings. And that is where she starts. The whole first part of this book is about how normal it is to feel terrible after a significant relationship ends. In fact, she sort of indicates that as a society, we are way too quick to expect people to chin up and get over it afterwards. The bottom line is that it's normal to feel grief and pain and anger, not necessarily in that order. And you might feel crazy, but that's normal too. Even if you've determined that you've fallen in love with the wrong person or a toxic person, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have low self-esteem or are a terrible judge of character. The influence of love is incredibly powerful. Some might say addictive. And the end of the relationship is like going cold turkey from an addiction. You crave an attachment that no longer exists. Then she dives into what was for me the most fascinating part of the book. Why is love addicted? First, she talks about the critical role of attachment or love in our survival as human beings. Love is as important to our survival as a species as is food, water, or shelter. Because we are so vulnerable when we are born, our survival drive for love and attachment is hardwired directly into our brains and into our nervous systems. And what is fascinating to me is that apparently love is the original addiction. The euphoria that we feel when we are first in love is created by a cocktail of neurotransmitters or brain chemicals. Love increases the level of dopamine in our brains, which creates euphoria and goal seeking, and it decreases the level of serotonin, which is responsible for satisfaction and contentment. So essentially, people in love feel euphoric, goal-driven, anxious, agitated, compulsive, and impulsive. Does it sound familiar? It sounds just like people who have taken cocaine. In fact, she makes the point that these neuropathways were designed originally to motivate us to attach to another person, and they are hijacked by other chemical addictions like heroin, nicotine, and alcohol. Love is the original addiction. Everything else is just borrowing those neural pathways and brain chemicals. So people tend to have different feelings towards those who are recovering from a broken relationship than those recovering from a chemical dependency, but frankly, the brain mechanisms are almost identical. Love stages. She goes on to cite Helen Fisher's work on the stages of love, which include lust, romantic attraction, and attachment. So the attachment stage is characterized by a decrease in dopamine and an increase in serotonin, so you feel less euphoric but more satisfied and calm. Unfortunately, if there's a rupture in the relationship, even at one of the later stages, that can throw your brain chemistry into an uproar and get us back into feeling obsessive and impulsive. When love is blocked or rejected, our feelings of passions are magnified, which is why toxic relationships are sometimes some of the most addictive. So I found all of this stuff fascinating. The next section discusses the two stages of love withdrawal, protest, and despair. So if you think about the stages of grief, protest covers the first three: denial, anger, and bargaining. So this doesn't feel at all like sadness. This feels almost like survival fear and provokes a fight-back response. The protest stage is akin to withdrawal from most addictions. It's characterized by intense cravings, obsessions about your loved one, and compulsions that feel out of control. This is when you know you shouldn't, but you text, you call, you show up where you shouldn't, You check social media and you mine the internet and others for information. None of this feels right, but it also doesn't feel like you can stop it. And you know what? Each of those actions actually gives you a fix, because all it takes is contact with your loved one. And in fact, because the bonding process engages our imagination, human beings only really need to conjure up a mental representation of their ex in order to get a fix. So checking their social media constantly is the equivalent of having an IV drip in your arm all day long. The bottom line is, these processes are inhabiting deep and ancient parts of our brain. The idea that we can simply talk ourselves out of it is laughable. The emotional brain always has the upper hand over the rational brain. And of course, when it turns out that our loved one doesn't return our affection, even after a lengthy protest period, we eventually fall into despair. Emotional pain lights up the exact same parts of the brain that physical pain does on an fMRI scan. Once you get to the point where you accept that it's over, you can finally start the healing process. In the end, you want to get to a point where you can think and feel at the same time. You need to calm your emotional brain down enough so that your rational brain can help you weigh the consequences of your action, and you can start acting from your values again. The author gives 3 techniques to help you cope while you're recovering. The first is mindfulness. So this involves staying in the here and now and just being aware of your thoughts, but not needing to act on them and not judging them. You can do this through meditation, journaling, talking to a therapist, etc. The next technique is stop and replace. When you start to think about your loved one, have another pleasant thought ready to replace it. Mantras also help with this. I have some mixed feelings about this idea, since I tend to think suppressing thoughts makes them more powerful. But her final technique is acceptance, which I do fully embrace. Accept your thoughts, your feelings, your memories. You don't have to act on them, believe them, or fuse with them, but you do need to accept that you are having them. And one of my favorite parts of this book is her 12-step program for Exaholics. It's obviously modeled on the Alcoholics Anonymous program, but it provides many of the scaffolding techniques of support and acceptance that have helped to lead so many people out of addiction and into the light. And the great thing is that there is a website that offers community, discussion boards, and blogs for support and communication with fellow travelers. Humans heal best in relationship and in community, so she is providing a wonderful service to help those who are navigating this bumpy terrain. All in all, I learned some new ideas and I made some new connections as a result of reading this book, and I wasn't even going through a breakup. I think it would be incredibly validating and motivational if I was. Let me know what you think. Comments are always appreciated, and thanks for watching.